Hello everyone, you're welcome back to Shabest online tutorial. In today's tutorial, we're going to solve this linear programming problem using Simplex method. And the given problem, we are given max, which is mean maximum. The objective function z is equal to 5x1 plus 3x2 plus 4x3 subject to 2x1 plus x2 plus x3 is less than or equal to 12. Then x1 plus 2x2 plus 3x3 is less than or equal to 15. x1, x2, x3 is greater than or equal to 0. To solve this problem, the first thing we're going to consider is two conditions. First condition, if the problem is given in a maximum form, the inequality is going to be less than or equal to. But if the problem is given in minimum, the inequality is going to be greater than or equal to. So these are the first two conditions we're going to first check. So if you look at these two equations given, it's less than or equal to and it's less than or equal to, and then is maximum here. So and the inequality is less than. So that means these two equations satisfy the first condition because it's maximum. But in a situation whereby you are given a problem that is minimum, instead of less than or equal to, maybe one of the inequality violates and maybe one of the inequality is greater than. Don't continue. First of all, writing in standard form by converting that inequality to its proper form, which is going to be less than. And how are we going to convert it? For instance, maybe this is greater than, for instance. How are we going to convert it to less than? By multiply the whole of this equation by -1. When you do that, then you are free to change the inequality from less than or equal to greater than or equal to. But in this case, the problem is okay. Now we're going to continue. Now solution. The first thing we're going to do is to write this problem in standard form. So we're going to write the problem in standard form. So the first one, we have max, then objective function is z, which is going to be equal to, what we are going to do, how many equations do we have here? Two equations, equation 1 and equation 2. So we're going to add two slack variable. What do we mean by slack variable? We're going to add two artificial variables. So the variable we're going to have is going to be what? S1 and S2. But in the objective function, when we add this S1 and S2, the coefficient is going to be 0, 0. But in this two inequality, we add S1 and S2. We add S1 to the first equation, then S2 to the second equation, because we have only two equations. If it is three equations, we add three slack variable. So let's see how it's going to work. So the objective function, we have 5x1 plus 3x2 plus 4x3. Then we add the two slack variable, which is what? 0 as coefficient S1, then plus 0 as coefficient S2. So we have done with the objective function. So subject to what? Subject to, we have 2x1 plus x2 plus x3 plus, then we add the first slack variable, which is what? S1 with the coefficient of 1, which is going to be equal to 12. We change this inequality to equal to 12. Then the second equation is x1 plus 2x2, then plus 3x3, then plus, we add the second slack variable, which is what? S2 is going to be equal to 15. So x1, x2, x3 is greater than or equal to 0. So this problem is already in standard form. So the next thing is to form our initial table. So this is initial table. So what is going to be the first here is going to be what? Basic variable. This is what the slack variable that we create, which is called basic variable. So we write basic variable. Then here is going to be, the initial variable is what? S1, S2, and S3. So we write x1 here, x2, then x3. Then the slack variable S1, S2. Then here, what is going to be our basic variable? Is going to be what? X1 and S2. Then here is going to be our objective function, which is z. Now, how are we going to fill this table? We just fill this table. It's very simple. It's just the coefficient of S1 in the first equation, the coefficient of S1 in the second equation, and here also we do the same thing. Then here is called the right hand side. Right hand side. So why are we going to get the right hand side? This is just the right hand side of the equation. So this 12 and 15 is going to be here. So let's start from the first one. X1. So in the first equation, what is the coefficient of x1? Is 2. First equation, what is the coefficient of x2? Is 1. What is the coefficient of x3 here? Is 1. What is the coefficient of s1? Is 1. What is the coefficient of x2? There is no x2, and you put 0 here. Then the right hand side is going to be 12. So in the next one is equation 2. What is the coefficient of s1 in equation 2? Is 2. No, it's 1. Sorry, we're here. Is 1. Then the coefficient of x2 in equation 2 is 2. The coefficient of x3 in equation 2 is 3. Coefficient of there's no s1 in equation 2, so we write 0 here, but they have s2 with coefficient of 1. Then the right hand side is what? Is 15. So how are we going to get the z value? You have to pay very serious attention here. What's the coefficient of our slack variable in our objective function? 0, 0. So write the 0 here, which is the coefficient is 0. So to get z value, what are we going to do? We multiply this coefficient of s1 with each of x1, each coefficient of x1 in both equations. Then we subtract it from the coefficient of objective variable. Watch very carefully and see how we're going to do it. So 0 multiplied by 2 is 0. 0 multiplied by 1 is 0. Then that 0 minus the coefficient of x1 here is going to give us minus 5. 0 minus 5 is minus 5. 0 multiplied by 1 is 0. 0 multiplied by 2 is 0. If you add them together, 0 plus 0 is the same as 0. Then that 0 minus 3 is going to be the same as 3. Then 0 multiplied by 0 is 0. Plus 0 multiplied by 3 is 0. Then minus it from x3, the coefficient of x2, rather this place is x2, so the coefficient of x2 is what? The coefficient, we are in x3 now, the coefficient of x3 is 4. Then 0 minus 4 is going to give us minus 4. So here 0, 0, 0 multiplied by 0, 0, 0 multiplied by 1, 0. Anything multiplied by 0 is 0. Then that 0 minus 0 is the same as 0. Then if you multiply again, we have 0. 0 minus 0 is the same as 0. If you multiply this string, will give us 0, and we don't ever have right hand side in the objective function, so we leave this place as 0. What we just did here, we multiply the coefficient of s1 here by each, we add them together. 0 multiplied by 2 plus 0 multiplied by 1, the result we minus it from the coefficient of x1 in x1 column, the same to x2 up to s2. So having got this, the next thing we're going to get is to perform our first iteration. So now we're going to perform the first iteration. So we create a table for first iteration. So here is the table. So in this table, the first thing we're going to do is to copy the same thing. So we have what a basic variable here is what? X1, X2, X3, then S1, S2. So this is what the right hand side. So, but here we're going to be careful here. So before we can get the basic variable here, the first thing we're going to do is to go back to the initial table. So to get the basic variable, we're going to first find our working column and the working row. So we're going to perform the iteration until all this number here turn toward positive. All this negative disappear. But in case you see any solving or any video, you see something positive here from the initial table, that means the add is, in this situation we subtract. 0 multiplied by 2 plus 0 multiplied by 1 is 0. Then minus 5, that is how we get this minus 5. Minus 3, that is why we get minus 3, because everything is going to be 0, 0 if you multiply it by 0. But in a situation where you see positive here, that means they add. 0 multiplied by 2 plus 0 multiplied by 1 is 0. 0 plus 5 is going to give us 5. This will give us 3, will give us 4. But in that situation, we are going to start our operation iteration until all the elements here turn to negative. But in this case, that we start with negative, all the elements, we make sure it turns to positive. It's still the same. Anyhow you do, you are going to still arrive at the same answer. But in this case, we are going to make sure all these elements turn to positive and including 0. Now, to get our working column, we are going to first, our working column is going to be on the what? On the minimum negative. What is the minimum negative here? This is the minimum negative here, negative 5. So here is going to be what? It's going to be our working column. So here is going to be our working column. So you can cycle it. If you have pencil, you can use pencil to cycle it. So this is going to be our working column at x1. Then where is going to be our working row? To get our working row, we are going to create another column, which is called ratio. We are going to take the ratio. So how are we going to get the ratio? So the ratio is the right hand side divided by the working column. Divided by what? The element correspond to this working column in this row. So the element of a working column corresponds to this row 12 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is going to give us 6. 12 divided by 2 is going to give us 6. Then 15 divided by 1 is going to give us a 15. This is our ratio. Now to get our working row, we are going to pick the minimum value of the ratio, and the minimum value here is what? 6. So 6 is going to be our working row. So now that we find the working row and the working column, now we can cycle this as our working. This is our working row, and this is working column. So the next thing we're going to do is to find the key element. What is going to be the key element? The key element is the intersection of the working column and the working row. So if you look at these two lines, where they intercept here. So therefore, these two here is going to be our key element. And the key element, we find it under what? Under x1. So therefore, our basic variable here is going to be what? Is going to be x1. Then x2, we write s2 as it is. Now, how are we going to get the value here? Is by change this key element to 1. And anything you do here, it must affect all the row in this first row. So how are we going to do to change 2 to 1? By dividing everything by 2. 2 divided by 2 is going to give us 1. Then 1 divided by 2 is going to give us 1 over 2. 1 divided by 2 is 1 over 2. 1 divided by 2 is 1 over 2. 0 divided by 2 is going to be 0. 12 divided by 2 is going to be 6. Okay, our focus here is to change this key element to 1. Now we turn it to 1 here by dividing it by itself. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And if you do that, it must affect everything here. So that is why we have 1 over 2, 1 over 2 here. The next thing is to get this S2 row. So how are we going to do to get x2 in row 2, x1 in row 2, x2 in row 2? By applying this simple formula I'm going to write. So this is the simple formula we're going to use to get our new value for row x2. So what does the formula say? Old value minus corresponding key column value multiplied by corresponding key row value divided by key element. Look at this division. It's only affecting the right hand side of this expression. So you write the old value minus, you do this separately. So old value, what is our old value? Is 1 here. Then minus corresponding column value, corresponding key column value. Where is our corresponding key column value? Is still 1. Then multiply by corresponding key row value. This is row, and the corresponding here is 2. Then multiply by key element. What is our key element? This cycle 1 is 2. Then 1 multiplied by 2 is 2. Then 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 minus 1 is going to give us 0. So here is going to be 0. To get the next one, then we do the same thing. What is our old value? The old value for this side is 2. Then minus corresponding key column value. Corresponding key column value is 1. Then multiply by corresponding key row value. This is corresponding key row value is still 1 here. Then divided by key element. What is our key element? Is still 2. Then when you do this, we are going to have 3 over 2. We are going to have 3 over 2 here. So the next one we're going to change is this 3. What is the old element? The old element there is 3. Then minus, what is the corresponding key column value? Corresponding key column value is 1. Then multiply by corresponding key row value. Corresponding key row value is what? Is also 1. Also 1. Then divided by what? Key element. And the key element is 2. So when you press calculator, we're going to have 5 over 2. The next one we're going to change is 0 here. Is 0. Now, what is the old value? The old value is 0. Then 0 minus corresponding key column value. What is corresponding key column value of 0? Is 1. Then multiply by corresponding key row value is 1. It's also 1. Then divided by the key element. The key element is 2. So if you do this operation, we're going to have minus 1 over 2. So the next one we're going to change is this 1 here. So the old element is 1, then minus corresponding key column value. What is corresponding key column value here is also 1. Then multiply by the corresponding key row value, which is 0 here, everything divided by 2, which is the key element. So if you perform the operation, we are going to have, and we do the same thing to the right hand side. What is the old value here is 15. We write the 15 minus corresponding key column value is 1, then multiply by corresponding key row value is what? Is 12. 12, then divided by the key element. The key element is 2. Then we perform this operation, we are going to have 9. So we are going to have 9. So I will successfully get all the value for S2. So our focus here is to make sure after we turn this one to 1, all the elements here is going to be 0, 0. So we are going to find Z. Now to get the value for Z, then recall what we did here. We write the coefficient of the basic variable. What the coefficient of x1 from the equation? The coefficient of x1 is 5. So if you look at here from the equation, as we set it to standard form, the coefficient of s1 is 5, and the coefficient of s2 is what? Is 0. So here is going to be 5 and 0. So what are we going to do next is to do the multiplication and subtraction. 5 multiplied by 1 is 5, then plus 0 multiplied by 0 is 0. 5 plus 0 is going to give us 5. Then we minus it from the Z value here. 5 minus 5 is going to be what? Is going to be 0. Then we do the same thing to get our S2. 5 multiplied by 1 over 2 is going to give us 5 over 2. Then plus 0 multiplied by 3 over 2 is still 0. 5 over 2 plus 0 is going to give us 5 over 2. Then 5 over 2 minus this 3 is going to give us what? Minus 1 over 2. Then the next one is x3. 5 multiplied by 1 over 2 is going to give us 5 over 2. Then 5 over 2 plus 0 multiplied by 5 over 2 is still going to be 0. Then 5 over 2 plus 0 is going to give us 5 over 2. Then 5 over 2 minus 4 is going to give us minus 3 over 2. The next one, we are on x1. So 5 multiplied by 1 over 2 is going to give us 5 over 2. If you multiply this by 0 is 0. 5 over 2 plus 0 is the same as 5 over 2. Then 5 over 2 minus 0 is going to give us positive 5 over 2. Then any number multiplied by 0 is still 0. 0 over 0 minus 0 is going to be 0. Now we are here. 5 multiplied by 6 is going to give us what? Is going to give us 30. By 0 is 0. Then 30 plus 0 is the same as 0. 0 minus 0 is going to give us the same 30. Now we are done with the first iteration. The next we are going to look at is the second. The next we are going to perform is the second iteration. The reason why we are performing second iteration is because we still have negative here, negative. So now to perform the second iteration, the first thing we are going to look at is to find our working row. And to get the working row, our working row is going to be on this Z value is going to be the smallest negative number. Between this 3 over 2, negative 3 over 2 and negative 1 over 2, which one is the smallest? This one is the smallest because this is negative. So this is going to be our working column. And to get the working row, remember what we can cycle this so that to avoid mistake, you can use your pencil to cycle this. This is our working column. Now to get our working row, then we do the same thing. What are we going to do? We create another column called ratio. So we're going to divide the right hand side by what? Divide the right hand side by the key column. Look at the column here, 1 over 2, and the column for the second row is 5 over 2. So 6 divided by 1 over 2 is going to give us 12. Then here we are going to have 9 divided by 5 over 2 is going to give us 18 over 5. So in between these two numbers, 12 and 18 over 5, which one is the minimum, the smallest one? So 12, if you divide 18 over 5, we are going to get something less than 12. So therefore, this one is going to be the minimum. So this one is going to be our working row. So all this row here is going to be our working row. Now, what are we going to do? We read our second iteration is going to be the basic variable. So BV, basic variable, then we write the same thing, x1, x2, x3, then S1, S2. Then here is the right hand side. So where do we get our key element? Where the intersection? So this is the key element at what? At X3. So the key column, we find it under X3 in row 2. So here is going to be what? X3. But here will still remain as X1. Now, to get all the value, the element here for X3, we are going to make sure we turn this one to 1 by what? Divide it by itself. 5/2 divided by 5/2 is going to give us 1 under X3. So here is going to give us 1 by dividing itself. And when you do that, it will affect all the elements. Now, let's do this one first. 3, to turn this 3/2, we are going to still divide it by about 5/2 that we use to turn this one to be 1. 3/2 divided by 5/2 is going to give us 3/5. Now this one is what 0 divided by 5/2 is going to give us a 0. Now we are going to change this -1. -1/2 divided by 5/2 is going to give us -1/5. Now we're here. 1 divided by 5/2 is going to give us what? 2/5. Then we also do the same thing. We have 9 here. 9 divided by 5/2 is going to give us what? 18/5. So the next thing we're going to do is to find all the value for this row X1. Now to get this row, we are going to apply the simple formula here. Old value minus corresponding key column value multiplied by corresponding key row value divided by key element. So we are going to apply this formula. So what is old value here? We are going to change all this value. What is old value? The old value is 1, then minus corresponding key column value of 1. What is key column value of 1? Is what? 1/2, then multiply by corresponding key row value. This is row value, the corresponding is 0, then divided by key element. The key element is this one that we cycle, which is 5/2. When you press this in calculator, we are going to have 1. So the next thing is what? X2. What is the odd element of X2? 1/2. So we have odd element is 1/2 minus corresponding key row value of key column value of 1/2 is the same as what? 1/2. Then multiply by corresponding key row value is 3/2, then divided by key element. The key element is 5/2. So when you perform this operation, we are going to have 1/5. The next is on X3. What is X3 here? Is 1/2. Then minus corresponding key column is still 1/2 multiplied by corresponding key row value. This got our corresponding key row value here, 5/2 divided by the key element 5/2. So when you perform this operation, we are going to have 0 here. So the next is S1. On S1, the old element here, the old value there is 1/2 minus corresponding key column value for this 1/2 is the same as 1/2 multiplied by corresponding key row value is -1/2, then divided by key element, and the key element is the cycle 1, 5/2. When you perform the operation, we're going to have positive 5/5, 3/5. Now we are on S2. The old element there is 0, so we are going to have 0 minus corresponding key column value is what? 1/2 multiplied by corresponding key row value, which is what? 1, then divided by key element. The key element is what? 5/2. When you perform the operation, we're going to have -1/5. Now the last one is what? The old element there is 6 in the right hand side minus corresponding key column value of 6 is what? 1/2, then multiply by corresponding key row value here is 9, then divided by the key element, which is 5/2. When you perform the operation, we're going to have 21/5. Now we have getting our row value for X1 and also for X3. So the next we're going to find is what? Z value. Now to get the Z value, we are going to do the multiplication, addition, then we subtract. 5 multiplied by 1 is 5, then 5 plus 4 multiplied by 0, then any answer we get, we subtract it by the coefficient of the basic function from the standard form here, which is 5. So when you do that, we are going to get 0. Here, 5 multiplied by 1/2 plus 4 multiplied by 3/5, then minus, this is S2 row, so the coefficient of S2 here is what? Is 3, minus 3. Then if you do that, it's going to give us what? 2 over 5. The next we are on what? On S3. 5 multiplied by 0 plus 4 multiplied by 1. Any answer you get, subtract it from the coefficient of x3 from the standard form. The coefficient of x3 here is 4. Then minus 4 is going to give us what? It's going to give us 0 here. Then now we are on S1. So S1. So 5 multiplied by 3 over 5 plus 4 multiplied by negative 1 over 2. Any answer you get, minus it from the coefficient of S1, which is 0. So minus 0 is still the same as the number. So we're going to have 11 over 5. Then we are on S2. S2, 5 multiplied by negative 1 over 2 plus 4 multiplied by 2 over 5. Any answer you get, you minus it from the coefficient of x2 from the standard form. And the coefficient of x2 here is 0. So here is going to be what? It's going to be 3 over 5. We are in the right answer. 5 multiplied by 21 over 5 plus 4 multiplied by 18 over 5. So any result we have, we're going to write it here because it's going to be what? It's going to give us 177 over 5. So what do we notice here in the z value? There is no negative again. Everything is positive and 0. So therefore, we are going to stop the iteration. Then all this right hand side is going to be our visible solution. So what is the basic variable here? X1. X1 is going to be equal to what? 21 over 5. Then X2. This one is X1. X2 is going to be equal to, there is no X2 here in this last iteration. So X2 is going to be 0. Then X3 is going to be what? X3 is going to be what? 18 over 5. And the Z is going to be what? 177 over 5. So when you substitute all these four values back to the given question, when you substitute here, 2 multiplied by x1 is what? 21 over 5. Then plus x2 plus 0. X2 is 0 plus 0. Then plus x3, which is what? X3 is what? Is what? 18 over 5. When you do the substitution here, we're going to get 12. Similarly, when you do the substitution also, we're going to get 15. And also, when you substitute all the value here, we are going to get this z value, which is 177 over 5. So this is how to use Simplex method to solve the linear programming problem. Thank you for watching, and please, if you have any question, you can drop in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks.